Part 1, A Peaceful Retreat. There's something magical about Clearwater Lake. Nestled deep in the heart of upstate New York, it's surrounded by rolling hills blanketed with trees that change colors like a painter's palette as seasons pass. The air smells fresh, almost sweet, and the water is so clear you can see fish darting beneath the surface on sunny days. For generations, this place has been more than just a piece of land, it's been home. Alex Carter grew up here. This lake wasn't just where they learned to swim or skip stones, it was their sanctuary. Life in the city had been hectic, demanding, and often suffocating. After years of working long hours as an architect, Alex decided enough was enough. They packed up their life, left behind the noise and chaos of urban living, and returned to the one place that always felt right: the family property on Clearwater Lake. Every morning started the same way. Alex would wake up early, brew a strong cup of coffee, and step outside onto the weathered wooden dock. There, sitting on an old chair that creaked slightly under their weight, they'd watch the sunrise paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. The stillness of the water mirrored the calm inside them. It was perfect not because it was flawless, but because it was real. The lake wasn't just beautiful, it carried history. Alex's grandparents had built the original cabin decades ago, using timber from the surrounding forest. Their parents added rooms over time, turning it into a cozy yet functional house. But what made the property truly special was its legal status. Clearwater Lake belonged entirely to the Carters. Every inch of water, every stretch of shoreline, it was all theirs. It wasn't just a claim, it was fact, backed by documents older than most people in the area could imagine. For years, things were peaceful. Sure, there were neighbors' houses dotted the hillsides around the lake, but most folks respected boundaries. Some asked politely if they could fish during weekends, while others brought their kids to paddleboard when Alex gave permission. Everyone understood the unspoken rule: this was private land. And Alex liked it that way. They didn't mind sharing occasionally, but the idea of handing over control? That was unthinkable. Then came her. Karen Miller moved in about 3 years ago. She bought the biggest house overlooking the lake, a modern monstery made of glass and steel that stood out like a sore thumb against the rustic charm of the area. From day one, Karen seemed different. While other neighbors greeted Alex warmly, Karen kept her distance, sizing up the situation like a chess player plotting her next move. At first, Alex thought nothing of it. People are entitled to their quirks, after all. But then Karen formed the Homeowners Association, HOA. Suddenly, flyers appeared in mailboxes inviting residents to meetings about community improvement and lake management. At first glance, it sounded harmless, maybe even helpful. Who wouldn't want better maintained roads or cleaner common areas? But Alex knew better. Something about the tone of those letters felt off. When Karen knocked on Alex's door one crisp spring afternoon, everything clicked into place. Dressed in designer jeans and heels that looked wildly impractical for walking through the woods, Karen launched into her pitch without so much as a hello. "Hi," she said briskly, flashing a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "I'm organizing the HOA, and I think we have a unique opportunity here. Together, we can make this neighborhood shine." Alex listened politely, nodding along as Karen rattled off plans for restricted boating hours, mandatory membership fees, and rules about landscaping. When Karen finally paused for breath, Alex spoke up. "That sounds great," they said carefully, "but I won't be joining." Karen blinked, clearly caught off guard. "Oh? Why not?" "Well," Alex explained, leaning casually against the doorframe, "the lake is mine. My family has owned it for decades. So, any decisions about how it's managed will come from me, not the HOA." For a moment, Karen just stared. Then she laughed a sharp, dismissive bark. "That's impossible," she said confidently. "No one owns an entire lake." "I do," Alex replied, unfazed. "Feel free to check the records if you don't believe me." Karen left shortly after that, muttering something under her breath about looking into it. Alex didn't think much of it at the time. They assumed Karen would realize the truth, back off, and focus her energy elsewhere. Unfortunately, they couldn't have been more wrong. Little did Alex know, this encounter marked the beginning of a battle unlike anything they'd ever faced. What started as a simple refusal to join a neighborhood organization would soon escalate into something far bigger and far messy. Because Karen wasn't the type to take no for an answer. And when she set her sights on something, she went all in. This version expands part 1 with vivid descriptions, natural dialogue, and a storytelling style designed to keep readers engaged. Let me know if you'd like me to continue expanding the rest of the parts. Part 2, Karen's power play. Karen wasn't the kind of person who took no for an answer. In fact, she prided herself on being a doer, a woman who got things done, no matter what stood in her way. Whether it was organizing charity events, lobbying for better streetlights in the neighborhood, or convincing the local grocery store to stock organic produce, Karen had always been the type to push until she got results. But this was different. For the first time in years, someone had outright dismissed her ideas and worse, challenged her authority. The day after her awkward conversation with Alex, Karen found herself pacing back and forth in her kitchen, replaying the interaction in her head. "No one owns a whole lake," she muttered to herself, shaking her head. It sounded absurd, almost laughable. How could that be possible? Lakes were public spaces, weren't they? Everyone knew that. You couldn't just slap a private property sign on something as big as a body of water. That wasn't how the world worked. But deep down, Karen felt uneasy. Something about Alex's calm confidence nagged at her. She didn't strike Alex as the type to bluff or exaggerate. Still, there was no way Alex owned the entire lake. There had to be some misunderstanding or maybe even a loophole Karen could exploit. Determined to get answers, Karen did what she always did when faced with a problem: she took charge. First, she called the county clerk's office, demanding to see property records for Clearwater Lake. The clerk, polite but firm, confirmed what Alex had said: the lake was privately owned, and the deed traced back to the Carter family. When Karen pressed further, asking if there was any way to challenge the ownership, the clerk gently explained that unless she could provide evidence of fraud or legal error, the records stood as they were. Frustrated but undeterred, Karen turned her attention to the HOA. At the next meeting, held in her sleek, minimalist living room, she rallied the other homeowners, spinning a narrative that painted Alex as selfish and unreasonable. "Listen," she began, standing at the front of the room like a general addressing troops. "We all moved here because we fell in love with Clearwater Lake. It's why our homes are worth what they are. But now, we have someone refusing to play by the rules. They're hoarding the lake, keeping it all to themselves, and ignoring the needs of the community." Her words hung heavy in the air. Some neighbors shifted uncomfortably in their seats, unsure how to respond. Others nodded along, eager to believe her version of events. After all, it was easier to side with someone who seemed so certain, so passionate. Karen went on, painting Alex as a villain who cared more about control than cooperation. "I've tried talking to them," Karen continued, her voice tinged with frustration. "I've explained that we need structure, guidelines to keep the lake clean and safe for everyone. But they refuse to listen. They think they're above the law." The room buzzed with murmurs. One man raised his hand hesitantly. "Are you sure about this?" he asked. "I mean, I've seen them around the lake, and they seem nice enough." Karen shot him a sharp look. "Nice doesn't cut it when it comes to protecting our investments," she snapped. "If we don't stand together now, we'll lose everything we've worked for. Property values will plummet. Is that what you want?" The man sank back into his seat, silenced by her intensity. Karen pressed on, outlining her plan to bring Alex in line. She proposed drafting a formal letter, signed by every member of the HOA, demanding compliance with their rules. If that didn't work, she hinted darkly, there were other options. Legal action, perhaps. Or involving the authorities. By the end of the meeting, most attendees were convinced. They left Karen's house buzzing with determination, ready to take on the supposed tyrant next door. Only a few lingered behind, exchanging skeptical glances. One woman pulled Karen aside as the crowd thinned. "Are you sure about this?" she asked quietly. "It feels extreme. Maybe we should hear them out before jumping to conclusions." Karen's jaw tightened. "Trust me," she said firmly. "I know what I'm doing. We can't let one person ruin this for everyone." Over the next few weeks, Karen threw herself into the fight with single-minded focus. She drafted the letter, pouring hours into crafting a document that sounded professional yet intimidating. Every word was chosen carefully to make Alex feel cornered, pressured to give in. When it was ready, she circulated it among the HOA members, collecting signatures with ruthless efficiency. Finally, the letter arrived in Alex's mailbox. It was long, full of legalese and thinly veiled threats. The gist was simple: join the HOA, follow their rules, or face consequences. Alex read it over twice, then set it aside with a sigh. They'd expected something like this, though not quite so dramatic. Still, they weren't worried. The truth was on their side. When Karen didn't hear back right away, she grew impatient. Days turned into a week, and still, no response. Her frustration boiled over. How dare Alex ignore her? Did they think they were untouchable? The silence only fueled her resolve. She decided it was time to escalate things. One evening, Karen marched down to Alex's house, letter in hand. She knocked loudly, tapping her foot as she waited. When Alex answered the door, Karen thrust the paper toward them without preamble. "You need to sign this," she demanded, her voice sharp. "Everyone else has agreed. Why are you holding out?" Alex took the letter, scanning it briefly before handing it back. "Because I own the lake," they said simply. "And these rules don't apply to me." Karen's face flushed red. "That's ridiculous," she spat. "You can't just claim ownership of a natural resource. It's not yours to control." "It is," Alex replied calmly. "Check the records if you don't believe me." For a moment, Karen faltered. Then her expression hardened. "Fine," she snapped. "If you won't cooperate, I'll make you." With that, she spun on her heel and stormed off, leaving Alex standing in the doorway, watching her go. They shook their head, bemused by her theatrics. Little did they know, Karen wasn't bluffing. She was already planning her next move, and it would bring the situation to a boiling point. This expanded version of Part 2 dives deeper into Karen's motivations, actions, and interactions with both Alex and the HOA members. It builds tension while maintaining a natural, engaging tone. Let me know if you'd like me to continue expanding the rest of the story. Part 3, the cop drama unfolds. It was a crisp autumn afternoon, the kind where the air feels sharp and clean, like it's been scrubbed by the changing season. Alex was out on the dock, tinkering with an old fishing rod they'd found in the shed. The lake shimmered under the late-day sun, its surface broken only by the occasional ripple from a curious fish. It was quiet, too quiet, as it turned out. The first sign something was wrong came when Alex heard the distant wail of sirens. At first, they thought nothing of it. Sirens weren't uncommon in the area. Sometimes, there were accidents on the highway or medical emergencies nearby. But as the sound grew louder, closer, unease began to creep in. This wasn't heading toward the highway, it was coming straight for them. Sure enough, moments later, 2 patrol cars rolled down the gravel driveway, kicking up clouds of dust behind them. Alex set the fishing rod aside and stood up, squinting against the glare of the setting sun. Officers climbed out of their vehicles, adjusting their hats as they surveyed the scene. And then, stepping out from behind the second car with a smug look plastered across her face, came Karen. "What seems to be the problem?" Alex asked, keeping their tone calm but firm. They didn't need to ask why Karen was here. That much was obvious. Karen didn't waste a second. She stepped forward, practically vibrating with indignation. "Officer," she said loudly, gesturing dramatically toward Alex, "this person is causing trouble in the neighborhood. They're refusing to follow basic community guidelines and are monopolizing the lake. They won't cooperate with the HOA, and now they're disrupting everyone's peace." Alex raised an eyebrow but stayed silent. Let Karen dig her own hole, they thought. There was no point arguing with someone so determined to twist reality. One of the officers, a tall man with graying hair and a kind expression, spoke up. "Ma'am, could you explain what exactly is going on?" he asked, his voice measured and patient. Karen launched into her spiel, talking fast and loud, as if volume alone could make her case more convincing. She accused Alex of being uncooperative, selfish, and even hinted at illegal activity. "They think they own the whole lake," she exclaimed, throwing her hands in the air for emphasis. "No one owns a lake. It's ridiculous." The officers exchanged glances, clearly unsure how to handle the situation. Finally, the second officer, a younger woman with a clipboard, turned to Alex. "Do you mind explaining your side of things?" she asked politely. Alex nodded and reached into the pocket of their jacket, pulling out a folded copy of the deed. They handed it over, along with a letter from the county clerk confirming their ownership of Clearwater Lake. "Here's the proof," they said evenly. "I've owned this lake for years. It's private property." The officers studied the documents carefully, flipping through pages and comparing signatures. Karen hovered nearby, fidgeting nervously as the silence stretched on. Her confidence seemed to waver slightly, though she tried to mask it with crossed arms and a scowl. "This appears to be legitimate," the older officer said finally, handing the papers back to Alex. He turned to Karen. "Ma'am, based on these records, this individual legally owns the lake. Unless you have evidence to dispute that, there's nothing we can do." Karen's mouth dropped open. For a moment, she looked like she might argue, but instead, she sputtered, that doesn't make sense. No one owns a whole lake." "It does in this case," the female officer replied gently. "If you have concerns about property laws or regulations, I suggest contacting a lawyer. But as far as we're concerned, there's no violation here." With that, the officers tipped their hats, climbed back into their cars, and drove off, leaving Karen standing in the driveway, speechless. Alex watched her for a moment, half expecting her to lash out or storm away. Instead, she just stood there, staring at the ground, her face flushed with embarrassment. Eventually, she muttered something unintelligible and hurried back to her car, slamming the door shut behind her. As her tires crunched over the gravel, kicking up another cloud of dust, Alex let out a long sigh. They hadn't wanted any of this, none of the drama, none of the conflict. All they'd ever wanted was to live peacefully by the lake, enjoying the home that had been in their family for generations. But Karen wasn't the type to admit defeat easily. If anything, Alex knew this was only the beginning. People like Karen didn't give up when things didn't go their way. They doubled down, looking for new angles, new strategies. And sure enough, over the next few days, the tension in the neighborhood ratcheted up. Word spread quickly about what had happened. Neighbors whispered among themselves, some siding with Karen, others shaking their heads at her antics. A few brave souls approached Alex directly, apologizing for Karen's behavior and thanking them for standing their ground. Others avoided eye contact altogether, clearly uncomfortable with the growing divide. Meanwhile, Karen retreated into her glass and steel fortress, plotting her next move. She couldn't let this go, not after being publicly humiliated in front of the police. So, she did what she always did when backed into a corner: she lawyered up. A week later, Alex received a formal letter from Karen's attorney. It was full of legal jargon and veiled threats, demanding that Alex relinquish control of the lake or face litigation. Alex read it once, shook their head, and filed it away with the rest of the nonsense Karen had thrown their way. They knew the law was on their side, but that didn't mean the fight was over. For months, the battle dragged on. Court dates were scheduled, cancelled, and rescheduled. Lawyers exchanged letters, filing motions and counter-motions. The stress weighed heavily on Alex, but they refused to back down. This wasn't just about the lake anymore, it was about principle. About standing up for what was rightfully theirs, no matter how hard someone else tried to take it away. Through it all, Alex couldn't help but marvel at how quickly things had spiraled out of control. What started as a simple refusal to join an HOA had turned into a full-blown legal war. And while they had faith that justice would prevail, they couldn't shake the feeling that the real cost of this fight wouldn't be measured in dollars or court rulings but in the fractured relationships and lost trust within the community. Still, Alex held on to hope. Hope that someday, when the dust settled, people would see the truth. That owning the lake didn't make them selfish or greedy, it simply meant protecting something precious, something worth fighting for. Until then, they'd keep standing their ground, one step at a time. This expanded version of Part 3 dives deeper into the confrontation with the police, Karen's reaction, and the escalating tension in the neighborhood. It maintains a natural tone and keeps the story engaging while avoiding any policy-violating content. Let me know if you'd like me to continue expanding the rest of the parts. Part 4, Fallout and Repercussions. The legal battle dragged on, stretching into months that felt like years. Every court date brought new headaches, stacks of paperwork, and endless phone calls with lawyers. Alex tried to stay focused, reminding themselves daily that this wasn't just about winning, it was about proving a point. The lake was theirs, plain and simple, and no amount of threats or intimidation could change that. But as the days turned into weeks, the strain began to show. Karen, for her part, refused to back down. She threw everything she had at the fight: money, resources, connections. Her lawyer filed motion after motion, each one more convoluted than the last. Some argued that the lake should be considered a public resource, others claimed there must have been some mistake in the original property records. None of it held water, literally or figuratively. Every time Karen pushed, the courts pushed back, reaffirming Alex's ownership over Clearwater Lake. But while the law was clear, the emotional toll was anything but. The constant back and forth left Alex exhausted, both mentally and physically. They'd wake up in the middle of the night, replaying arguments in their head or wondering if they were doing the right thing. Was it worth all this stress? All this fighting? Sometimes, they weren't sure. But then they'd step outside, look out at the shimmering surface of the lake, and remember why they were doing this in the first place. This place wasn't just land or water, it was home. And homes are worth protecting. Meanwhile, the neighborhood fractured under the weight of the dispute. The HOA meetings, once lively gatherings where neighbors caught up and shared ideas, became tense battlegrounds. Karen rallied her supporters, accusing anyone who questioned her actions of betraying the community. "If you're not with us, you're against us," she declared during one particularly heated session. Her words created a chilling divide, pitting neighbor against neighbor. On the other side, a small but growing group of residents started questioning whether Karen had gone too far. These were the quieter ones, the people who preferred peace over drama. They remembered Alex from before all this mess, the friendly face who occasionally let kids play by the lake or waved hello when passing on the road. Sure, Alex kept to themselves, but that didn't make them a villain. Slowly, these skeptics began speaking up, challenging Karen's version of events. One evening, after yet another contentious meeting, an older man named Tom approached Alex. He lived 2 houses down and had always been polite but distant. Now, standing awkwardly on Alex's porch, he cleared his throat and said, "Look, I don't know what's going on between you and Karen, but I wanted to say sorry. For assuming things, I mean. We all got swept up in her story, and maybe we shouldn't have." Alex blinked, surprised by the unexpected apology. "Thanks," they said finally, offering a small smile. "I appreciate that." Tom nodded, looking relieved. "Anyway, I'll leave you be. Just, hang in there, okay?" As word spread that some neighbors were starting to doubt Karen's crusade, cracks began to form in her carefully constructed narrative. A few brave souls even attended court hearings, curious to see how the case unfolded. When they heard the judge confirm Alex's ownership not once, but multiple times, they couldn't help but wonder if they'd misjudged the situation entirely. Karen noticed the shift, of course. She always did. At first, she doubled down, trying to rally her troops with fiery speeches about standing firm against injustice. But as more neighbors distanced themselves, her confidence began to waver. The woman who once commanded rooms with her presence now seemed smaller somehow, diminished by doubt and isolation. Then came the day when reality hit Karen like a freight train. After yet another failed attempt to challenge the deed, her lawyer delivered the final verdict: there was nothing left to fight. Every legal avenue had been exhausted, every argument shot down. Clearwater Lake belonged to Alex, end of story. Karen sat in stunned silence as the lawyer explained the situation, her face pale and drawn. When news of the defeat reached the neighborhood, it spread like wildfire. Some residents celebrated quietly, relieved that the drama might finally be over. Others avoided discussing it altogether, embarrassed by their role in the conflict. As for Karen, she retreated into her house, blinds closed and curtains drawn. For weeks, no one saw her outside. The woman who had once dominated the community disappeared almost entirely. Eventually, though, life moved on. One crisp morning, a for sale sign appeared in front of Karen's house. It didn't take long for buyers to snap it up. Someone from out of state, eager to escape city life and enjoy the tranquility of Clearwater Lake. When the moving truck arrived, Karen loaded her belongings without saying goodbye to anyone. She climbed into her car, adjusted her sunglasses, and drove away, leaving behind only whispers of her infamous campaign. With Karen gone, the HOA disbanded. Without her driving force, the organization crumbled under its own weight. Meetings stopped, rules faded into obscurity, and the neighborhood slowly began to heal. Old friendships rekindled, new ones formed, and the sense of division that had plagued the area started to lift. For Alex, the aftermath was bittersweet. On one hand, they were glad the fight was over. They could finally breathe again, knowing the lake was safe. On the other hand, the experience had changed them and the community forever. Trust had been broken, and rebuilding it wouldn't happen overnight. Still, Alex chose to focus on the positives. They'd stood their ground, protected their legacy, and proven that sometimes, doing the right thing means enduring hardship. To help mend fences, Alex took a proactive approach. Working with local authorities, they established clear boundaries around the lake, posting signs to remind visitors of its private status. At the same time, they opened designated areas for public use, allowing responsible neighbors to enjoy the beauty of Clearwater Lake without infringing on their rights. It was a compromise, not perfect, but fair. Over time, relationships improved. Many former adversaries approached Alex with sincere apologies, admitting they'd misjudged the situation. Some even offered to help maintain the shared spaces, planting trees or cleaning up litter. Grateful for second chances, Alex welcomed them, fostering a spirit of cooperation rather than conflict. Today, Clearwater Lake remains a symbol of resilience and independence. As Alex sits on their dock, watching the sun dip below the horizon, they reflect on the lessons learned. Sometimes, standing your ground means more than protecting what's yours, it's about preserving your peace of mind. And sometimes, even the most stubborn opponents can teach you something valuable about yourself. This expanded version of Part 4 delves deeper into the fallout from the legal battle, Karen's eventual departure, and the healing process within the community. It maintains a natural tone, keeps the story engaging, and avoids policy-violating content. Let me know if you'd like me to continue expanding the final part. Part 5, Redemption and Resolution. Months passed after Karen's departure, and life around Clearwater Lake slowly returned to a rhythm that felt almost normal again. The for sale sign in front of her glass and steel fortress had been replaced by a sold sticker, and the new owners moved in quietly, a young family with 2 kids who seemed eager to embrace the simple joys of lakeside living. They weren't pushy or demanding, they just wanted to be part of the community. Alex appreciated that. The neighborhood itself began to feel lighter, as if a storm cloud that had hung over it for too long had finally drifted away. People started talking to each other again, not just about HOA nonsense or property disputes, but about real things. Kids played outside more often, dogs barked happily from backyards, and laughter echoed through the trees once more. It wasn't perfect, old wounds don't heal overnight, but it was progress. Alex noticed the change one crisp spring morning while sipping coffee on their dock. A neighbor walked by, someone who had sided with Karen during the height of the conflict. 4 weeks after the legal battle ended, this person had avoided eye contact, clearly ashamed of their role in the drama. But today, something was different. As the neighbor approached, they hesitated for a moment before calling out, "Hey, mind if I say something?" Alex set their mug down and turned toward them. "Sure," they said evenly, curious about what would come next. "I owe you an apology," the neighbor admitted, rubbing the back of their neck awkwardly. "I let myself get caught up in all that mess with Karen. I should have listened to you instead of jumping to conclusions. So, yeah. Sorry." It wasn't eloquent or dramatic, but it was genuine, and that meant everything. Alex nodded, offering a small smile. "Thanks for saying that. I appreciate it." The neighbor gave a sheepish grin before continuing down the path, whistling softly. Watching them go, Alex couldn't help but feel a flicker of hope. Maybe forgiveness really was possible even after all the hurt. As the seasons changed, so did the dynamics of the community. More neighbors reached out, offering apologies or simply trying to rebuild connections. Some brought baked goods or invited Alex to barbecues. Others helped with projects around the lake, planting native flowers along the shoreline or organizing clean-up days. Slowly but surely, the rifts began to close. One afternoon, Alex found themselves chatting with Tom, the older man who had first apologized months ago about ways to make the shared spaces around the lake more welcoming. "You know," Tom said thoughtfully, "maybe we could put up some benches near the water. Give people a place to sit and enjoy the view." "That's a good idea," Alex replied. "I'll look into getting permission from the county." Tom chuckled. "Permission? You own the lake. Don't need anyone else's approval." Alex laughed too, shaking their head. "Still, better safe than sorry." Together, they sketched out plans for a few wooden benches and recruited volunteers to help build them. When the project was finished, Alex watched as families gathered around the new seating areas, laughing and sharing stories. It felt like closure, not just for the conflict, but for the entire chapter of chaos Karen had unleashed. Even the newcomers to the neighborhood seemed determined to leave the past behind. The young family who bought Karen's house became regular faces at community events, always ready with a smile or an offer to lend a hand. Their kids quickly learned the unspoken rules of lake etiquette: no littering, respect quiet hours, and ask politely before fishing. One evening, as Alex sat on the dock watching the sunset, the father of the family joined them, carrying 2 beers. "Mind if I join you?" he asked, holding up one of the bottles. "Not at all," Alex said, scooting over to make room. They sat in companionable silence for a while, listening to the gentle lapping of the water against the shore. Finally, the man spoke. "Listen, I heard about everything that went down here before we moved in. Sounds like it was rough." Alex shrugged. "It wasn't fun, but it's over now. We're moving forward." The man nodded. "Well, count us in for helping keep things peaceful. No Karens allowed." He grinned, and Alex laughed despite themselves. "No Karens allowed," they agreed. Looking back, Alex realized how much they'd grown through the ordeal. Before Karen came along, they'd been content to live quietly, keeping to themselves and enjoying the solitude of Clearwater Lake. But the fight had forced them to step up, to defend not just their property but their principles. In doing so, they'd discovered a strength they didn't know they had and a deeper appreciation for the value of community. Of course, there were still moments when doubt crept in. Late at night, lying awake and staring at the ceiling, Alex sometimes wondered if they could have handled things differently. Could they have avoided the confrontation altogether? Been more diplomatic? Maybe. But deep down, they knew they'd done the right thing. Standing your ground isn't easy, but it's necessary, especially when what you're protecting matters. Over time, Alex also came to see Karen's actions in a slightly different light, not as pure malice, but as misplaced ambition. She hadn't set out to destroy lives or ruin relationships, she'd genuinely believed she was doing what was best for the neighborhood. Her methods had been wrong, sure, but her intentions weren't entirely evil. Understanding that didn't excuse her behavior, but it helped Alex let go of some of the lingering resentment. By summer, Clearwater Lake felt like a completely different place. The air buzzed with energy, not tension. Neighbors organized potlucks, canoe races, and stargazing nights. Even the wildlife seemed livelier, with deer wandering closer to the shore and birdsong filling the mornings. It was as though the land itself had healed alongside its people. One evening, during a particularly beautiful sunset, Alex stood on their dock and looked out across the water. The surface glowed gold and pink, reflecting the colors of the sky above. For the first time in years, they felt truly at peace, not just with the lake, but with everything. This place wasn't just theirs anymore. It belonged to everyone who cared enough to treat it with love and respect. And maybe, just maybe, that was how it was supposed to be all along. As the last rays of sunlight disappeared below the horizon, Alex took a deep breath, feeling the cool breeze brush against their face. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities, and new chances to grow. But tonight? Tonight was perfect.